And if we open up the history screen, we have the three areas of history: history of present illness, review of systems, and past family and social history. We have the opportunity to say yes, the chief complaint was documented, or no, it was not. And remember, the chief complaint can be inferred. So we'll say yes, our chief complaint was documented. As far as the history of present illness, we have the option to count criteria such as location, quality, severity, duration, or we can say that there was the number of chronic diseases reviewed. Now remember, as far as the documentation guidelines, it's not just stating that the patient has a chronic disease, it's giving the status of that chronic disease. So you've got either option that will apply toward your history of present illness. Now notice here that it keeps track of what type of history of present illness you have at this point. So if we had one chronic disease reviewed, we have a brief history of present illness. If we have three, then it's become an extended history of present illness. The same thing is going to happen with counting our elements. Location gives me brief, but if I have location and quality and context and associated signs and symptoms, if I have four or more, it becomes an extended history of present illness. So the software is going to track for you where you are as far as achieving those elements. For review of systems, we would click on each of the different systems reviewed, and then if the physician says all other systems negative, we have the option to click there and give all other systems negative. Now, just like we kept track of it in history of present illness, we keep track of it here in review of systems. So you can see, let's go back and let's uncheck some of these. Okay, if I click one, I've got a partner review of systems. When I click the second one, it becomes an extended review of systems. Remember, 2 to 9, systems reviewed is an extended review of systems. I would have to click 10 different systems for it to become a complete review of systems, or click all others negative. You will still have to make the judgment call whether that physician's documentation, whether that language supports all other systems negative. So we've got a complete review of systems, and then we have past family social history. And we've got the common criteria: current medications, prior illnesses or injuries, health status or cause of death of parents, living arrangements, use of drug, alcohol, tobacco. Notice, as with the other sections, we've got a complete past family social history at this point. Now, you may remember from the documentation guidelines that for new patients and for consultations, you need one from each area: past, family, and social. But for an established patient, you only need one from 2 of the different areas, and you can see the software tracks that as well. So if we had one area, it's pertinent. We only have to have one more area, either family or social, for it to become a complete review of systems, because this is an established patient. So you can see at this point we have a comprehensive history. We still have our code suggestion of 99211. This Y here is because we entered the criteria for incident 2 and showed that yes, we had met the requirements there. Now let's suppose this patient comes in and they're unable to give us their history. Maybe they're brought in, maybe the patient has dementia and they can't really give us their history. And we say the history was unobtainable from any source. This cues us that any history components we've entered are going to be cleared, and we're going to have the opportunity to choose the type of history this patient has. Now remember, the documentation guidelines indicate you state why you couldn't obtain the history. They don't go on and tell you how you count that. What is happening in audit situations is that you're given credit for the level of history you needed to evaluate that patient. What I've seen from a practical standpoint is that they give you credit for the same level as your exam. At any rate, you're going to choose whatever level of history you think is pertinent or would have been done in this case. Whether it's problem-focused, expanded problem-focused, detailed, or comprehensive, you're going to choose that. And it's going to give you that level of history here. And this is only if you could not obtain the history at all. Well, let's uncheck that box and let's go back and say that we had our comprehensive history otherwise. We had our extended history of present illness. we had our complete review of systems, and we had a complete past family social history. So we ended up with a comprehensive history. Also, at this point, you may want to use some of your note macros. You have this box at the bottom that allows you to enter notes that pertain to this encounter that you're auditing. We've also preloaded Intelicode with some sample note macros. You can set up your own note macros. You've got a physician that does the same thing over and over and over, and rather than have to write in and type in every time the same comment, you can set up macros that you can just click a key or you can enter here and have that macro entered in. A couple of benefits to that. You're saying the same thing every time. Plus, if you do it with a macro, the system tracks, the software tracks how many times you've done that for this physician. And you can run a report that shows this was an issue for this physician, 14 times in this audit, whatever it is. When you set up a macro, you will call it either an issue or a recommendation. Now, an issue is the problem, and of course, a recommendation is what they should do to fix that problem. And you will see the software, the sample office, comes preloaded with quite a few macros, and then you can enter your own. A couple that I have entered that I have had issues with is, for example, family history non-contributory. If a physician continues to say that and there are issues with that and I want to discuss that with him, I can enter that as a macro. Some of the other things entered in here in the sample macros, follow-up, for example. Follow-up is not an appropriate chief complaint. We're reminding them they need to say follow-up for what. Legibility, that's a big one. Legibility for the physician. Some portions or this entire note, legibility was at least questionable. And then we've got a recommendation of what is required for legibility. So you can make these as short and succinct as you like, or you can make them as detailed. You can use the macros that are preloaded. But this is a chance for you to enter that in a couple of different ways. Again, instead of having to type it out every time, you've got it entered just quickly. You've set it as you need to say it. Also, using the macro allows you to track how many times the physician does it. So let's say he said follow-up and we didn't think that was an appropriate chief complaint. So we're going to insert that. It's going to show here at the bottom of our note, at the bottom of our audit. It is also going to print on our encounter detail report and on our summary report. So it's going to be available to show the physician exactly what we're talking about. Now you do have, if you are going to free text, if you're going to enter this in yourself, you do have your common word processing buttons down here where you've got bold, italics, underline, all of those kind of things that should be familiar if you've used Word or any other word processing. So we've got the patient history screen. We've gone through the different types of history.